Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our informational interview sessions. My name is Laura Kay, and I'm the president of the New England Franco-Haitian Youth Federation. Today, we have our next guest, Roosevelt Langlois. He attends Braintree SDA Church. Thank you, Roosevelt, for being with us today. I'm super excited.
No problem. No problem. Pleasure to be here. Excited about, talking a little bit about my journey and able to share and hopefully inspire others.
All right, well, we're gonna jump right in. My first question is the dreaded interview question. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Haitian born, born in Haiti, immigrated to the United States around 4 or 5 years old. And my roots were in Ephes Church in Dorchester. It's actually funny, I found out there was another Ephes as I became a young adult in Rhode Island. But I'm from the one in Dorchester, spent the majority of my youth there, grew up in the church, never really left. And then after high school, I just pursued my studies, my collegiate studies, I should say, in Massachusetts. Started at Massasoit Community College, where I obtained my associate's degree in liberal arts. Very proud of that accomplishment. I'll share a little bit more about why later. And then UMass Law, studied business administration with a concentration in accounting. And then as I started working, I went to graduate school at Eastern Nazarene College and obtained a master's in management there.
Wow, you're all about the business, all about the money.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about like accounting and the industry and what it looks like to work in that environment?
Yeah, sure. It's very cutthroat. I would warn everybody that, corporate America isn't for everybody. And I had these dreams. How I came to even choose the field, it wasn't that it was a passion of mine, but after getting my associate's degree, I was like, what should I study? I didn't like nursing, right? I didn't want to do engineering, like the typical Haitian kind of careers, or at least our parents kind of push us. Yeah, like 3 of them, and they try to push us into it. And I was like, I'm organized, I'm calculated. And at the time, I had a vision of Wall Street that I would kind of get up, dress every day, be with my briefcase, on the train. So I chose it strictly off of that. So I was like, cool, let me major in this. And as I started working, it wasn't what I envisioned it to be. But, to answer your question a little bit more thoroughly, I don't mean to be long-winded. It's a field that you kind of got to play a game, sort of. When you're at work, you can't be comfortable. People are always watching. There's a lot of deadlines, and I quickly found out there's an expectation that you got to already know what you're doing. So I'd say there's a lack of training, compared to other fields.
Yeah, I feel like the performative aspect is something that a lot of like people of color, Black people in the workplace feel, code switching and
for sure, yeah.
It's yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
When you say that the industry is not what you thought it was going to be, like what did you think it was and how does that compare to what it is?
Interestingly enough, I'm extroverted, and I thought my coworkers and people around me would be as such to get the work done. But I found that people were in their own little prisons and pockets. And, that eventually became a little frustrating because how do you communicate? Now, in this world, right, there's Skype, and in the corporate world, there's Microsoft Teams and Google Meets and all that. But as far as like the physical interaction, there isn't as much like water cooler talk or kind of like, hey, what are you doing over the weekend? Like people just ask that to save face, at the beginning, but they don't really mean it. So that was a little bit shocking. And people weren't as genuine as I thought. When I had gained some friends on the job, some of them would tell me like, oh, someone came to your desk looking for you. and you weren't there, and your manager was like, oh, he's taking a little bit longer breaks, than what's expected, or hey, he should really be helping you out with that. Why isn't he available at the moment? So as far as like the kind of behind the back talk, from people in management, and this wasn't just like entry level stuff. I had like ascended to a position where I was in management. So there wasn't a trust there, and that really kind of worked on me, eventually. And there was some corporate trauma with that, with some of the things that were going on, the politics. And people can talk about that all they want, but until you've experienced, certain people that, you think are your colleagues for real, and, they do certain things, it's like, oh, wow. And it forces you to operate, way outside of your spot. That's no way to live or even work. So.
You answered that question exactly how I thought you would. I went to BC. I started off in the business school and I transferred after one semester because I just felt like it wasn't for me. I was like the only Black woman in almost all of my classes. Like it was just uncomfortable. Everybody was fake. And yeah, it wasn't for me, but I'm glad it is for you, or you might feel that it has been for you. And
that's very interesting. That should have been like foreshadowing of what's to come. Because when I was in business school, and my mom's in school now, and she kind of talks about it, the teachers weren't really helping me to advance. It felt like they were making it the most difficult. And at the time, I had locks, so I would like walk into the room, and being, one of few Black men or the only Black person, like as you kind of said, it would, the looks would kind of be like, what is he doing here? Especially in a field like that where like presentation and is everything, and kind of how you look. So, there was always this barrier where I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm working so hard just for you to do your job and helping me, and, doing that. But I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but it eventually, soon enough, it wasn't a place where I was like, you know what, this ain't for me.
yeah, I feel like that kind of segues into our next question about like
Mm-hmm.
how you feel like your faith and Christianity plays into your career, especially when you're dealing with people that make you feel uncomfortable for being yourself. How do you like navigate that space?
Yeah, the counts I would give to anybody out there, which unfortunately, um, I didn't apply myself. Faith didn't play a part in my career. Only when I wanted to advance did it. So when I wanted that next job, or when I wanted to negotiate a certain salary or something like that, I'd be praying like, oh God, like, I want to do this, I want to do that. Like, can you please help me get this job? But faith didn't play an aspect in choosing the career. And what I really should have been praying about is like, what's my life's work? So I came to a point maybe during the pandemic, a little bit pre-pandemic too, where I always said to myself, like, I'm never going to be in a position of management here. Not because I can't, but I don't want to, meaning not the company, but the field. And then I was in management. So I was like, okay, like, what am I doing here? And then I kind of started praying about it and was like, I'm not happy with this, and I don't feel like I'm making a difference. So it was the first time I kind of was like, whoa, like, God, like, is this what you want me to do? I already had like a exit plan. And I was just like, man, even the exit plan was just more of the same, kind of like climbing the corporate ladder. And I was no longer interested in that. So I did a self-assessment of sorts, and I realized, I fell into some of the trappings of success where you have an increase in spending power. You're kind of going up the ladder, and you got the job, and you can do a little bit more things that you may have not done growing up. But, it didn't meet my heart's content. So I was like, it was scary a little bit, where you work so hard, and my whole kind of flow up to that point was, it's so hard to get this degree. I'm not giving up on this degree. Like, I can't do that. Like, I'm sticking through it. And I really, for the first time, I think in 2020, was like, yo, Lord, like, what do you really want me to do? And I was in a place where I was totally open with it, meaning like, yo, if you want me to be a painter and that's what it's gonna be, mind you, I'm not like a big manual labor guy, but I was like, if you want me to be a painter, a farmer, whatever's gonna make me happy, I'll figure out the monetary piece or how to monetize that after. Like, I don't care. So it hadn't, but it is now as far as the faith playing a role in my career.
I appreciate your honesty about that because some people would just say, I prayed about it and God told me when,
Yeah.
you didn't really pray about it.
Hmm.
But I feel like you going on that journey kind of helped you to see how important it is to include God in your plans. You know what I mean? We make
Hmm.
plans, we decide like what we want our lives to look like and how we want things to go based off of, like you said, our idea of success. But don't really think about what God is asking us for. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I knew it wasn't like anything to be scared about. Like, I didn't feel like I was running away from anything. Like, I don't know, like a Bible character or something like that, where, hey, this is where you're pointing me to, like ministry or something, and I'm running away from that, or you've been told me to be a nurse. I just didn't know what it was. And, kind of as a young adult, at the time I was in my late 20s, and I'm like, dang, like I put in all this work. I know they're transferable skills, but I don't want to start over and start at the bottom either as far as like the money. So I was like in a crossroads where I don't care about the money because I want to find my passion, my life's work, but at the same time I need it to, live and pay expenses and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I resonate with so much of what you said, but we don't got time. We don't got time to talk about all
It's
that.
all good. It's good. It's good.
So my next question is, you kind of started talking about it, but it's like, how do you know when you're working in God's purpose for your life? How did you know that you weren't, and how did you kind of like re-navigate yourself or redirect yourself, I would say?
For me, it's a combination of things. There's some people who quote that like, oh, God wants you to be holy or not happy or something like that. I don't subscribe to that. I think those things could mirror each other or work in tandem. But I realized some of like my true gifts and my passions weren't in my work. So, when it'd be Sunday night, I'd be like, oh dang, I gotta go to work. And the only rewarding part about work for me was the check. So there was a point where I was like, all right, there aren't really Christians in corporate America. I'm not really seeing anybody talk about faith or whatever. So maybe I'm supposed to be here to reach somebody. And there were times where, I felt like I like that I served that purpose in some regard. But I was just like, yo, my gifts and how I would like to serve people is not being accomplished here. Um, and I tried to then use my field to then do the service. So I was like, all right, let me sign up. I signed up for a nonprofit foundation. I was on the board, and I was the treasurer. And for those of you who don't know, it's called the Ken and Mabel Brace Foundation. They raise money for Seventh-day Adventist schools across the country. Really, they have an international presence too. And I was like, I bet I'm the treasurer now. It's faith-based. It's still accounting, and I ran the books, did help with fundraising, all that, and it still wasn't doing it for me. It still wasn't. So I was like, this can't be it. So I took a season where, I'm still in it, where I was really praying hard about it. Um, and it's funny because I was like, yo, I think I'm pretty accomplished. And I felt like I had nothing because all that other stuff is just for the birds that I'm not using that. But there was a part where I was like, I feel like I have the gift of administration. So let me take that aspect and figure out the next step.
Yeah, I think that you just said like so much good stuff. I think one,
Mm-hmm.
one, you talked about it earlier, like our parents tell us we need to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer,
Mm-hmm.
or else what we're doing doesn't matter. And now that we're older, now that I'm older, I understand why they suggest those careers, because that's where the money is. And when you come from Haiti and you don't come from money, and you come to a new country where you see money, like you
Mm-hmm.
want your kids to have that. But if they don't have the fulfillment and the enjoyment doing those things, like the money isn't going to matter. Like, and I feel like your story is like a testament of that. Like the money is great. We need money to survive. We got bills, but there has to
Mm-hmm.
be more. And I think that's something that's important for the people listening to think about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And I sort of, part of it for me was a guilt trip. Like, in going to that community college at the time, I wasn't a citizen of the US. So I didn't have a green card or anything like that. So I didn't have the financial backing as some people would. So, my mom really worked extremely hard to put me through undergrad. Now, grad school, I kind of used one of the companies where I was at, and they paid 2/3 of it, and I paid out of pocket. But those undergraduate years, I was like, man, I saw my mom work like 60, 80 hours a week just to get this thing done. And, I kind of, I want to be in a place where I don't want for nothing or she doesn't either. And I'm kind of getting there. Well, at least I felt in the career, or I saw it. I was like, all right, like 3 or 4 years, I'm gonna be good. So there was sort of that guilt to be like, I'm gonna leave all this and whatever. But what made me feel comfortable was that I can always come back. Any part of my life where, I don't know, whatever venture I went and explored and I needed to make some money, I could always come back. But I just got to the point I didn't care anymore.
Yeah, for sure. And you're talking about something that a lot of us like feel in terms of our parents and making
Yeah,
sure we're doing the things that we need to do so that they don't feel like their sacrifices are in vain. But we have to learn to like balance the two, you know what I mean?
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the training that you went through to become the accountant that you are. So like, did you like, is it necessary to get a master's? Do you have to have like certain certificates and licenses, or like what's kind of the pathway for someone who's interested in this role? What do they have to do to get there?
So a master's, no, you don't have to have one. That was just me, being like, hey, I feel like I have the gift of administration. So let me get a certification that kind of validates that for other people. So it did help me win some jobs over people or like stand out. But generally, you can get an associate's in accounting, and that goes a certain way. There's certain every entry level jobs you won't get paid like that, but you can be what's called a coordinator, or an accounting coordinator. But generally, you just gotta major in accounting. Some schools they call it accountancy. Um, but you major in that, and then you kind of go out there and try to look for a job. You can get an internship, which I wish I did during school. I wish that was a real focus for me. That gives you an advantage. Um, the most popular license that people know is CPA, Certified Public Accounting. Um, I remember when I was in school, I saw a poster that said CPAs on average, this was like 2012 when I saw this, on average make $1 million more over the span of their career than people without that certification.
So you was
And
running, you was like, I'm getting that.
yeah, and I thought so. I thought, right, I was like, I bet, cool. And when people would ask me like, yo, just get your CPA, or certain friends or family, really family, like, hey, get your doctorate or something like that. Well, my heart's not really in it. And that was like a sign where, like, to be I'm making a distinction here. When you work in public accounting, it's a different beast than any other place. Corporate accounting is your tax accountants in a top 5, top 10 companies generally, and you're working busy seasons. 60 hours is mandated. Doesn't mean you get your work done in that time, but it's mandated. Working like a dog for 2 seasons, which are about 3 months each. You're paid handsomely. The bonuses are nice. Um, the career trajectory is nice after you leave that because it's only temporary, 2 or 3 years really. Um, but I didn't want that. Never worked in public accounting, never wanted to. And when people would, say the CPA thing, and I would look at jobs and see the requirements, see what they're paying. But I was just like, oh, like if I'm gonna get it, it's gonna be without that. So you can get a lot of certifications, CPA, CFA, CMA. There are a lot of them, but generally to get started, you just study accounting and then work from there.
Cool. Do you know of any opportunities off the top of your head that you feel like you think people who are interested in like trying this out should take advantage of?
Yeah, when I was in school, there was a program, I'm pretty sure it's still around, called Inroads, and it's for people of color. They help you connect with some of those companies that I mentioned. When you declare your major, maybe your junior year, probably sophomore year, you can probably get in there early, depending on how many credits you've gained already. They connect you with these companies, and you just got to maintain a GPA through graduation. And in the summers, you would, you would go to the company and gain some experience. Even the winter session, it feels like a month or so. What's crazy about it is because those companies are rolling in dough, you get paid for a student. So I remember one summer I came back and I was making maybe ten to $12 an hour. This was maybe 2011, 12, 13, don't remember. And I thought I did okay. It was all right. Got me some Jordans or some books, whatever. And I spoke to a counterpart of mine when he came back from school, and he's like, "Oh, I worked at PwC," and he was like, "Yo, the checks were nice." And I'm like, "How much we talking?" He's like, "Well, they paid us like 26 an hour, and we were taxed at a certain level, whatever." So I forgot what he told me, if it was like 18, $1,900 checks or something like that. And they weren't doing much. He said you do a little bit after you graduate towards that. You weren't doing much. So I would counsel anybody, try to find programs like that for people of color, or hit up staffing agencies. Um, their job is to help you find a job. Now I have my beef with them on some level, but as an entry level trying to get in, they're great.
That's great. And it's definitely a good time to be a person of color right now, to be honest. Everybody wants to hire a Black person. So
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
this is your
Diversity,
time.
inclusion. Yeah. Yeah.
This is your time.
Yeah.
Um, we kind of started talking about it a little bit earlier, but what would you say is the most challenging piece of your job?
Uh, I think the most challenging, I think it's part of it is the expectation where um I remember I was telling my mom something once about the challenge I was going through on the job. And she said, if you were, and she was 100% right. Some people are biased or whatever, but she was like, hey, if you weren't a person of color, there'd be a little bit more leeway for you. So I think the expectation of I gotta have it together. There was one time I was struggling with something, and I asked a manager of mine. So I was a manager. I reported to her, and then there was a controller. And I'll never forget this. She was looking out for me. I think she was of Asian descent. And I was like, hey, I emailed such and such person about this. I told him I don't know. Like, I need a little bit of help. And she said, never say you don't know. Don't write that. Don't say it. Figure it out. Don't ever say that. And I was like, what? And I was like, but I don't know. And she was like, figure it out. And I'm like, but I can't. Like, like, don't you think I've kind of gone? I didn't say that, but I was thinking that. But she was just throwing me little tips. And that was kind of like shocking because people would come on the job. I've trained my managers whether it's system based or how we do things at the company. But when it comes to me asking questions, like I have it figured out. So um, that was a challenge, and that kind of brought me a little bit to God, where I'm like, yo, before I go into this office or log on, I just gotta give him the day because these people are different.
How did you how do you figure it out when you don't know? Are you just supposed to go on YouTube and Google it? Like,
Believe it or not, I've done some YouTube. I've done some of the Google. Um, I've trained like my staff, like when I had staff, I trained them like, hey, this is how you critically think. What are your resources and figuring out this answer? So in accounting or business, it's always a shared drive. You can kind of go see how people have done things before. But to answer your question, I got to a point where I don't care what they think, or if they think I don't have it, or maybe I'm not the most competent or whatever. If it's going to take me 20, 30 minutes and I can ask you, I'm going to ask you. And if you don't want to answer it or you don't have time, I'm going to ask the next person. So I just was just like, yo, YOLO, forget that. Yeah.
pro tip, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
On the opposite side of that, what would you say is the most rewarding aside from the money?
Aside from the money, and that's a good question because it came to a point where the money it wasn't worth it like that. Um, I guess I know it sounds basic, but I guess the social interaction, with people, meeting different people from walks of life. I think they've taught me certain things that I may not have gained in other spaces. So what I mean by that is I grew up in the church, but I always went to public schools. So I didn't go to an event school or, wasn't sheltered in that way. So when they talk about certain things like pride, right? Or there was a job I was at and there was a transgender person where it was like a woman forming to a man, you dress like a woman, all that stuff. And I had to interact with him on some level. And I was like, yo, I kind of feel like, yo, what's happening? But I learned something at that job that I wouldn't have learned in the church. Um, so I learned how to treat this person as a human being, engage with them without it being clearly like, oh, you live in this life or like whatever. That was good for me. So part of the rewarding thing to answer your question is working in a secular space. You either have to defend your faith in some way or your faith grows. So
That's beautiful. So beautiful.
yeah.
Okay, so if you could do this all over again, and I feel like I know your answer, but I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
ask anyway. If you could do this all over again, would you choose the same path for yourself? And if not, which I think the answer is no, but I could be wrong,
Mm-hmm.
what would you do differently?
For a long time, I was proud of my degree because when people hear accountant, it's like, ooh, like your numbers, you're this or that or whatever. So if I could do it over again, I would definitely do the management route in grad school. But as far as the undergrad, you're probably right where no, I probably would have gone into maybe education. Um, I think there are a lot of my friends are educators, and hearing some of their stories and their experiences, um, and even dipping and dabbling in that a little bit. There was a point where I was going to make a career switch, and I took my MTEL. Um, and I took the reading and writing one or whatever. I passed it, and there was a halt on that. But I think I might have studied education in undergrad. If I even in doing accounting, I would have had a double concentration. So that's something I didn't know. A lot of my peers, they majored in accounting and finance or accounting and management. accounting and entrepreneurship, because it was only a few classes more. I wasn't hit until later in my senior year. So if I had done that route, even now I would have doubled. I would have had a double, but probably would have done something in the educational route.